Hello, welcome to Hobby Chat with Adam's Hobby Stuff, and today I'm going to be talking you through hobby knives, going through a little bit of what I like when I'm using a hobby knife or what I look for, a couple of hints and tips on using them, and at the end of that I'm going to show you what I spent my hobby money on this week. So this is my trusty, faithful hobby knife. I've had this one for pushing 20 years. It's an awful long time, you say. Now, it came in a kit. So this is a little set that came with the Lord of the Rings partwork back in the early 2000s. Customer of the Games Workshop store that I was a manager of at the time had subscribed twice, got a couple of these kits and gave me one. In amongst it, a lot of this stuff has changed since. I think the rule and a couple of bits are still the same, but most of it's switched out as it's broken or whatever. This has stayed consistent, and I've found this to be the best style of hobby knife going. Now, before I give hints and tips on how to use a hobby knife, why do I think this style is the best? Well, a couple of reasons. One, fits nice in the hand, it's a good size, it's fairly robust. Obviously this has lasted me nearly 20 years, so it's fairly robust. But the important thing for me is that it's got a retractable blade style on it. Now, I broke my other one of these, so I had two. If you watch the channel fairly diligently, you'll notice at the very start of my videos I was doing, I had two of these. One's like my dirty one that I use when I'm using milliput and I cut green stuff up with it, whatever, and that's this one. This is the filthy one. The other one I keep fairly clean for obviously doing the proper models, because you don't really want to be rubbing your hands over milliput even when it's dried when you use the knife. Now, I broke the clean one and then didn't know where to get one of these from as a replacement, so I picked up this one from Warlord Games. Now, there is nothing wrong with this hobby knife, and before I start dissing it potentially, but for me the critical thing is I use hobby knives a lot. I do some sort of hobby every night, always use a hobby knife. I've managed to cut myself twice in a year with this. Now, not through how I use the knife on a model, but purely from that when you're working with it, I like to be able to cover it back up, put it to one side to make sure we're being as safe as possible while we're using our materials. Now, with a removable top, the amount of times I've put that down, put it somewhere else, not put it near the knife, just put the knife down thinking, oh, I won't bother covering it, either gone to pick the knife up or gone to pick up another piece of equipment or a model I've put down and stabbed myself on it. Now, not too badly in the end, it's not too drastic because you do make fairly clean cuts as long as your blades are new, but it's not really something you want. So although nothing wrong with that, you've got to be super careful, and for me I prefer the retractable blade. Other reason that I think this style of knife isn't as good as the retractable style of knife is actually replacing the blade. So this one here, you grip and twist and then the blade slides out. Now, the problem with that is if you replace your blades regularly, which you should, because a sharper blade is always a safer blade, and we'll go into that why later, you are constantly loosening and tightening this, and it will eventually wear out and not grip the blade. And I did find when I'm using some hard maneuvers or doing some real pieces of detail, I was finding I was twisting this and loosening the blade off whilst I was using it. So for me, nothing wrong with it if this is the style of knife you particularly like, but for me, definitely not as good. And I do still use this occasionally, but definitely not as much as the other one. So I said obviously I'd broken one, and I did track down online a new one, same make. So it's a Swan Morton made in Sheffield. So if you're from the UK, it's a British product, but I'm sure there's versions of this done in every country that you can do. Now, I will drop some links down below of where I found it on Amazon. So why did I hunt down a new one? Well, to be honest, it was only when I started slicing myself with the replacement Warlord Games one that I thought I am going to find a brand new replacement. So I did. So why is this so good? So before, retractable blades. Now, changing the blades on here, they're really secure. They're not going to drop out even if you slide the knife out of that compartment, if that makes sense. So it's like a stop lock thing. So you slide it out, it stops there, and it won't move around unless you push it down and you bring it out for changing. But even if you slide it out too far by accident, it's not going to come flying off. Now, when you're changing the blades, I would always use some sort of either a pair of tweezers or something, or a pair of pliers, and then you just literally grab the back of the blade. You could use your fingers, but again, it's always about safety. Be as safe as you can when you're changing these blades, because there's no point risking yourself. Now, I wear glasses, so it's again another safety element, but whether you want to choose to do that or not, it's your decision. Now, putting them on, we can hold the back of the blade, just slide it on, and again, if you want to push your fingers, you can. If you want to be super safe, take a pair of pliers and just slide the blade on. Perfectly safe, locked away. So I like the safety features of this style of knife. Sounds like I'm doing a QVC episode here. I'm not, but I'm just trying to explain my kind of method in my madness as to why I like them. The other principal thing, and the reason I would always go online and get a cheap knife like this, is replacement blade cost. When you go to a hobby store, whether that be a Games Workshop or whatever, you are going to pay a lot of money for blades. And, this is just an example of these ones, how they come, and you get a little replacement blade in there and you can swap it. Now, the biggest thing I can say when using any hobby knife is swap the blade every single time it starts to get dull. Now, a dull blade is perfectly usable for scraping off mould lines. So if you've got a dull blade on a knife and you've got a mould line at the back, you can scrape a mould line off with a dull blade, and that'll be absolutely fine. And the mould line remover that Games Workshop sells is just literally a dull bladed thing. Costs a fortune for something that's dull. I'd always go with a hobby knife. Now, the reason I'm saying keep the blades sharp is, one, well, it gets those mould lines off quicker and easier. Gives you a nice clean effect. But two, you're more likely to hurt yourself, believe it or not, with a dull blade than you are with a sharp blade. So how's that the case? Now, I know I keep doing this and taking bits of plastic off the end of the blade. So again, if you're with a knife, running your finger from there upwards to there is presenting no risk, because that is only going to hurt you if you go this way. And I like to keep them bits of plastic off the end of my knife, so when I'm using it, there's not stuff building up on there potentially going to slip. So looking at using this and why a sharp knife is more important or safer than a blunt knife, holding the knife nice and secure, and if I'm then going to remove little bits of plastic from here, you can see there's no danger this is going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? I can't hit my thumb with it, so get a nice secure grip. You pull that. Now, if this blade was blunt, it would be sticking in the plastic. Right? You wouldn't be able to get a clean cut, it wouldn't curl up nicely like that, and it would potentially stick and pop out. Now, I haven't got a blunt blade to demonstrate, but in effect it'd be like you're digging in there and suddenly it jerks out. That's when you're going to hurt yourself. Now, blunter blades are more likely to do it. Also, pulling towards me. And a lot of people say you should always cut away from yourself and don't cut towards you. Now that, let's be honest, that was advice we got when we were kids. Because when you're a kid, you're just learning how to manipulate your hands, you're learning tools, you're learning equipment. So cutting towards you when you're a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, probably not the best idea, because you will cut and you don't have the motor strength or the manipulation abilities to safely move a knife around near your hands. Now, I'd like to think as an adult, you've got that mobility. Now, if you haven't, for whatever reason, then fine. You know, I would understand why you wouldn't want to do it. But for me, cutting towards you is definitely a lot safer. Cutting away from you, you can't get the control. And I'm not trying to do this badly here. It just happens to be it. So if I'm cutting like this, see, I'm trying to get a consistent cut and it slides off. It's harder to do it. You can do it, as you can see, but that took me a couple of goes. Whereas having the control in yourself, it's easier. Just my personal thoughts. So don't be afraid of cutting towards yourself, but be super careful. Hold your knife in a grip that if you are going to manipulate and move, you're not going to catch yourself. Now, like this, I've got that finger in the way, so I'm not going to hit my own thumb. If I'm doing it other times, another grip I like to use is just like this here, and you're doing little tiny manoeuvres. I could put some shots from any video of mine and you'll see using these hobby knives and cutting around myself. So, waffling again, carry on. Blades, replacement blades. Replace your blade as soon as it gets blunt. Another good reason to search online to find a big source of blades. Be careful that you don't buy the ones that won't fit your knife, because they do come in all different kind of varieties. Now, when I first got this hobby knife, I ended up down at head office at Games Workshop, and they had packs and packs and packs of these things. I ended up getting about 500 that lasted me about 10 years. But you can get these in packs of hundreds for sort of nice and cheap, and definitely a real good sort of piece of kit to have in your arsenal. That was it. I felt like a QVC selling piece, as I said before, just talking about hobby knives, but vital to get yourself a good one. Get one that you're comfortable with, that you can safely use, you can safely manipulate. That's it. That's all I recommend, whatever you like the look of. But if you like the ones I'm using, you like these, you've believed my selling piece, link down below, check all that out, as I said. So what have I been spending my hobby money on this week? Nothing too exciting. It has been Christmas, but I generally don't get hobby stuff for Christmas, because I buy myself so much during the year that I tell my family and friends, look, I don't want anything. But I did buy myself something this week, little eBay win. X-Wing Miniatures game first edition. I think I've done a video on this discussing how I still play first edition X-Wing Miniatures. And the hunt now is about getting the models off eBay in that first edition packaging, and that's just as exciting actually as as playing the game. That's what I've got this week. Look, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Hope you enjoyed that. Another waffle for this week over with, and I'll speak to you soon.